So we have also lined this with the epithelium and we have a beautiful laryngeal framework in front of us. Yes. So now this laryngeal framework, we will divide it into three parts. Yes, at the level of the true vocal cord. Above this will be known as supraglottis. Supraglottis. At the level of true vocal cord is glottis. And below the true vocal cord is what is subglottis, right? So the larynx is divided into three sides. These are the three sides of the larynx, and each of the sides are divided into additional subsides. So now if I ask you, what are the subsides of the supraglottis? Supraglottis, can you tell me the subsides of supraglottis? Yes, we have the epiglottis, aryepiglottic fold, arytenoid, quadrangular membrane, false vocal cord. And below that was ventricle. That was what we saw in the paper model. Let us see how it matches with it here. So here we have the epiglottis, we have the aryepiglottic fold, we have the arytenoid. Yes, we know that this part is also what is the inlet of the larynx, or it is also known as epilarynx. Yes, and then we have the quadrangular membrane, we have the false vocal cord, and in between the false and the true vocal cord, this area is what is known as this area. This is what is known as the ventricle. Yes, so let us write this down. Yes, while writing it down, while marking it, we will mark it in this picture, which is the endoscopic picture. Because when it is asked in the endoscopic picture, mark what is the area. So yes, we are going to mark it. So we have, this is the epiglottis. This is the aryepiglottic fold. This is the arytenoid. Yes, this here is the quadrangular membrane. This is the quadrangular membrane. This is the lower border of the quadrangular membrane. This is known as false vocal cord. This is false vocal cord, right? And in between the false vocal cord and the true vocal cord, this area, yes, this gap in between the false and the true vocal cord, this is what is known as the ventricle. This is known as ventricle. Is that clear? So we have all these parts. These are the components of supraglottis, epiglottis. Now you will tell me, yes, quickly you tell me. Epiglottis, aryepiglottic fold, arytenoid, yes, false vocal cord, and ventricle. Is that clear? Absolutely clear. Do you have to rectify all these parts? No, you know the picture, you have understood the model, you know it very clearly. Now quickly tell me, what is this part? Tell me, what is this? Yes, what is this? What is this? Aryepiglottic fold. Tell me, what is this? False vocal cord. What is this in between? Yes, that is the ventricle. What is this here? This is arytenoid. Very good. What is epilarynx? What is epilarynx? Epilarynx is the inlet. Inlet. What is inlet? Inlet is formed by epiglottis plus aryepiglottic fold plus arytenoid. Now coming to the glottis. What is glottis? Glottis is at the level of the true vocal cord. At the level of the true vocal cord is known as glottis. So what are the components of the glottis? Now where the two vocal cords meet anteriorly on the thyroid, this is what is known as anterior commissure. This is known as anterior commissure. Now this hole is the true vocal cord, and the true vocal cords, they are attached posteriorly to, yes, the vocal process of arytenoid, So the vocal process of arytenoid and the anterior surface of the body of the arytenoid, this is what is known as the posterior commissure. So this complete is what is known as posterior commissure. Okay, so we have the anterior commissure, the true vocal cord, and the posterior commissure. So now just see this and tell me which part of the true vocal cord is membranous, which part of the true vocal cord is cartilaginous, which is membranous. Yes, we know that the posterior 1/3 is formed by the vocal process of arytenoid. So that has to be cartilaginous. This has to be cartilaginous, which means only the anterior 2/3. Anterior 2/3 is membranous. And posterior 1/3. The posterior 1/3 is cartilaginous. What is the significance of knowing this? Now whenever we speak, I told you that the two vocal cords are duct and subglottic air pressure builds up and that is released, vibrating the vocal cord. When the two vocal cords vibrate, which part of the two vocal cord vibrates? What do you think? The membranous part vibrates or the cartilaginous part? It is only the membranous part that vibrates. The cartilaginous part just adducts or abducts. Cartilaginous part does not vibrate. Only it adducts or abducts, which means that the part which is vibrating is only the membranous part. Yes. So can you tell me, if it is the membranous part which is vibrating, which will be the part of maximum vibration of the true vocal cord? Which part of the true vocal cord will be the part which vibrates maximum? In other words, that will also be the part which will get damaged maximum because of voice abuse. Whenever there is a sudden voice abuse, whenever there is a prolonged voice abuse, that is the part that is vibrating maximum. So that is working maximum. That will be liable to getting damaged most. So which is that part of the vocal cord? First tell me which part of the vocal cord is vibrating maximum. Which part? Yes, it is membranous. Which part of the membranous vocal cord? Yes, we can see that the membranous part is fixed anteriorly also and it is fixed posteriorly also. So which will be the part of maximum vibration? The midpoint of the membranous part. So midpoint of the membranous part is the part of maximum vibration. That is the part of maximum damage. Yes. So whenever there is any hemorrhage occurring in this area leading to nodules or polyps, this is the most common site. Is that very clear? So if we are seeing this picture, this is the picture of the glottis. This is how the glottis actually looks in real. The endoscopic picture, this is the glottis. Yes, this is the true vocal cord. The glottis is, the boundaries of the glottis are, the upper boundary is by a line drawn at the ventricle. Above the true vocal cord is the ventricle. Yes, so if we draw a line just below the ventricle, at the lower border of ventricle, and the lower border it extends 1 centimeter below the medial free edge of the true vocal cord. So this is the medial free edge of the true vocal cord that you are seeing, till 1 centimeters below that, in between these two lines, in between this upper line and the lower line. Lower line is 1 centimeter below the free edge of true vocal cord. So this is what is glottis. Below that will be subglottis, right? So the area of maximum vibration will be midpoint of membranous part. Yes or no? Membranous part. Have you understood this? Midpoint of the membranous part? Okay. So I am going to draw an area, this. And I'm going to tell you that this is the most common site of vocal nodular polyp formation. Yes or no? Yes, okay, true. Now let me say the same thing in a few other forms. The most common site of vocal nodular polyp formation is the junction of anterior 1/3 and posterior 2/3. Yes or no? Is that true? Yes. Okay, now the most common site of vocal nodular polyp is the junction of anterior 1/3 and middle 1/3. Anterior 1/3 and middle 1/3. Is that also true? That is also true. The most common site of vocal nodular polyp formation is the midpoint of membranous part. Is that also true? Midpoint of membranous part. That is also true. So all of them are the same thing we are saying in different ways. Is that very clear? So no matter how it is asked, if you have understood what is the membranous part and what is the midpoint of membranous part, and whether it is junction of anterior 1/3 and posterior 2/3, whether it is also the junction of anterior and middle 1/3, if you have understood it, then you will never confuse it. So can you notice this? Yes, these are what are the vocal nodules, small nodules on the vocal cord. Can you see what the site is? Junction of anterior 1/3 and posterior 2/3. Junction of anterior 1/3 and middle 1/3. Yes, or midpoint of membranous part, Is that clear? Yes. Now from the vocal cords, from the anterior commissure, goes a ligament to attach the true vocal cords to the thyroid. We know that the true vocal cords are attached to the thyroid, and this attachment occurs with the help of a ligament. This is what is known as anterior commissure tendon, or also it is also known as Broyles ligament. Now what the significance of this is, it was initially considered that this helps to spread the glottic tumors to the thyroid cartilage. But nowadays, it has been found that all the membranes of the larynx, all the membranes that we have read, they actually limit the growth of the spread of carcinomas. They do not help it to spread, but they limit it. They stop it to grow further. So this hampers spread spread of tumor. Now, below the level of the true vocal cord, everything is known as the subglottis. So, subglottis is below the glottis. Below glottis is what is subglottis. So now when we made the beautiful laryngeal structure, we also divided into 3 sides, and we also saw what are the subsides of each of the sides of the larynx. Now let us see what the cavity is. The cavity is the most important because that is the one through which air is going to go inside for respiration. So what are the parts of the cavity of the larynx? Now we know the parts of the larynx, so cavity is very easy to remember. So what are the parts of the cavity? Yes, we saw the model and we saw that this part of the cavity, this part in between the epiglottis, the aryepiglottic fold and arytenoid, this is what is known as the inlet. So the first part is the inlet. Next is the part in between the two quadrangular membrane. Yes, that is what is known as vestibule. Next, below the vestibule will be the part that is in between the two false vocal cord, that is known as rima vestibuli. Rima vestibuli. Yes, so the false vocal cord, many a times they are also called as vestibular folds. Why? Because they are the lower border of vestibule. They are also sometimes known as ventricular folds. Why? Because they are just above the ventricle. So the false vocal cord are also sometimes known as vestibular folds. They are known as vestibular or ventricular folds. Ventricular folds. Okay, so we have the rima vestibuli. Then below that we have the part that is in between the false vocal cord and the true vocal cord. What is that area? Yes, that is the ventricle. And then we have that part in between the two true vocal cords. What is that? That is rima. Rima means cavity. Rima means cavity. Rima glottidis. Rima glottidis. And then we have that part that is below the true vocal cord. That is what is known as subglottis. Subglottis. Is that very clear? So now can you tell me the parts of the cavity? I will write 1, 2, 3, 4. You tell me what these parts are. This here is a quadrangular membrane. This is a quadrangular membrane. This is the upper border of the quadrangular membrane forming the aryepiglottic fold. Right, this is the epiglottis here. Okay, and we have this is the lower border of the quadrangular membrane. What is the lower border of quadrangular membrane known as? False vocal cord. False vocal cord is also known as vestibular folds, ventricular folds. Okay, this is the conus elasticus. You can see the cone form now in this cut section, this coronal cut section, you are able to see the cone form nicely. And the upper part of the conus elasticus is what is known as the true vocal cord. We know that this is true vocal cord, right? Okay, so now I am going to write 1, 2, 3, 4. You are going to tell me what these parts of the cavity are. 1, this is in between the two A folds. Yes, epiglottis and A fold. This is very good inlet. 2, this is in between the two quadrangular membrane, vestibule. 3, in between the two false vocal cord. This is rima vestibuli. 4, this arrow. 4, in between the false and the true vocal cord. Yes, 4, this part. This is in between the false and the true vocal cord. What is that? Yes, that is what is known as ventricle. Now 5, in between the two true vocal cord. That is rima glottidis. And now 6 is subglottis. Now just note here that the epithelium from the false vocal cord is not directly going to the true vocal cord like this. Are you noticing? Yes, the epithelium from the false vocal cord is going laterally to form a sac-like structure. And then it is coming to line the true vocal cord. Yes. So this sac-like structure which is formed laterally is what is known as saccule. And why do we have this saccule? We have this saccule because it contains a lot of mucus glands which secrete mucus. Why? To lubricate the true vocal cord. Why is lubrication required of the true vocal cord? What is the lining epithelium of the true vocal cord? Is it the ciliated columnar? No, it is stratified squamous. Stratified squamous, do we have mucus glands? We do not have. And this part of the larynx is the part that is rubbed against each other repeatedly when we speak. So there should be lubrication in this part to allow free movement. Yes. So to hamper the damage, to not allow damage to occur while the movement is occurring, while we are speaking. So for that, the secretions that are produced, the mucus that is produced is from the saccule. That is why saccule, this is what is saccule, and saccule is also known as the oil can. oil can of the larynx, and this ventricle, this part, this leads to the saccule. So this is the opening which leads to the saccule. So this is known as sinus of Morgagni of the larynx. Tell me, yes, that reminds me of sinus of Morgagni of the pharynx. Yes, what was that? Area in between. Base of skull and superior constrictor. Which structures pass through that? Thala. Yes, that is for you to revise. What is thala? Yes. So now here, what is the sinus of Morgagni of the larynx? That is the ventricle. It is known as sinus of Morgagni. Now sometimes what happens is that in people who blow against a closed glottis, what's the meaning of blowing against closed glottis? Blowing against closed glottis means that the two vocal cords are in midline. When are the two vocal cords in midline? Whenever the person is speaking. So whenever the patient is speaking also, at the same time he is blowing down also. So what happens is that the two vocal cords are in midline. The patient is blowing air down. So from here the air is going, but the vocal cords are in midline, so air cannot go down. Where it goes, it enters into the saccule, and that leads to enlargement of the saccule. And this enlargement of the saccule is what is known as laryngocele. Laryngocele. This is because of blowing down, blowing against a closed glottis. In closed glottis. For example, have you not seen weightlifters? Like that they do? Yes. So in weightlifters, in trumpet blowers, yes, they will blow also and they will produce some sound also with their throat. So trumpet blowers, in glass blowers, or also sometimes when there is a carcinoma, there is a tumor here, that the air can enter but it cannot exit. Yes, in tumors of ventricle. What happens is that the air enters but it is not able to come out. So that is what is laryngocele. Laryngocele can be either just inside, that is what is known as intrinsic. So it can be intrinsic, or it can pierce. Can you see here? It can pierce the thyroid membrane and present as a swelling outside. That is extrinsic. It can be intrinsic or extrinsic. Now let us see how they look like. Yes, so it can be an intrinsic or an extrinsic. What is asked is extrinsic laryngocele occurs because of herniation of this saccule through which membrane? Which membrane is that? Yes, that is in between the thyroid and the hyoid. Thyrohyoid membrane. Thyrohyoid membrane. Yes, now let us see how endoscopically it appears. It appears like this. Can you see? It will press on. Here, can you see? It will press on the quadrangular membrane. So here what we are seeing is that it is pressing on the quadrangular membrane here, and there is a bulge that you are seeing. It will also press on the false vocal cord, then it can also compress the true vocal cord. It can lead to change in voice. If it is large enough, it can also lead to difficulty in breathing. And also if it has pierced the thyroid membrane, you can see it as a swelling outside. So when you are seeing it as a swelling outside, how do you know that this is laryngocele swelling? In the neck we can have so many other swellings. How do you know this is swelling of the laryngocele? Yes, when you ask the patient to blow, do Valsalva, this will increase in size. As you can see, this is without Valsalva, this one, the first picture, and this is after Valsalva. It increases in size. And when you compress the swelling, there will be a sudden gush of air into the larynx, producing a hissing sound, and that hissing sound is known as, okay, I will tell you what it is known as. You tell me that if there is a pharyngeal pouch swelling of pharyngeal pouch, from the Killian's dehiscence, Zenker's diverticulum swelling here. Yes. How do you know that this swelling is a pharyngeal pouch? On palpation, there is gurgling sound. What is that known as? That is Boyce. Yes, that is Boyce. That was known as Boyce sign. Here, just cut the O. This is Bryce sign. So, it increases on Valsalva. And on compression, it produces a hissing sound that is known as Bryce sign. Yes, it is asked in your exam, Bryce sign. Yes, Bryce sign is present in laryngocele, and it can get infected. It can lead to laryngopyocele also. And that is why we do not want it to get infected, lead to laryngopyocele. That can lead to respiratory distress. That is why if anybody has it, this can be present either because of all the things that I have told you, that trumpet blowers, glass blowers, carcinomas. Sometimes, as in this child, why is it present? It can be also congenitally present. So it can also be present congenitally. It can be congenitally also. So how do you manage it? You excise it. Excision is done either endoscopically or through an external approach. So here you are seeing the endoscopic picture of the larynx, and you are going to tell me the cavity of the larynx. Okay, tell me this first part of the cavity. The first part in between the epiglottis, the aryepiglottic fluid arytenoid. What is this? Inlet. This 2. This is vestibule. 3. In between the two false vocal cord, that is in between the two false vocal cord. It is actually the cavity. Yes, I cannot draw in between. If I write in between, no. So I'm writing like this. Okay, close to the false vocal cord. What is that? That is rima vestibuli. Now in between the false and the true vocal cord, that is ventricle. In between the two true vocal cord. Now here, yes, this I can draw. This I will mark as 5. Okay, 5. What is this? This is rima glottis, and below that, that is subglottis. So what is the primary function of the larynx? Primary function of the larynx is the earliest function that was developed in lungfish. Yes, it was protective. Protection of the airways is the primary function of the larynx, and for protection of the airways, we have 3 good sphincters. The first is the inlet. So the protective sphincter first is the inlet. We know whenever the food passes over the inlet, the epiglottis closes down. So that is the most effective sphincter. This is the most effective sphincter. Effective sphincter. And second is at the level of the false vocal cord. The false vocal cord also, they come in midline and they protect aspiration to occur. And the third is at the level of the true vocal cord. Third, so we have 3 sphincters, out of which the most effective is the inlet of the larynx. So we have this model in front of us where we have the cartilage of the larynx connected to each other by intrinsic and extrinsic membranes, and then made stronger by the connection of the intrinsic and extrinsic muscles, and then we lined the epithelium and we saw the cavity, how it was looking, what are the parts of the cavity, and also when we are into each part of the cavity, we know we are in the supraglottis, we are in the glottis, we are in the subglottis, right? Now, there are certain spaces around the larynx. So what are these spaces and what is the significance of these spaces? Like we had spaces around the pharynx also. Yes, so there are 3 important spaces in the larynx, around the larynx. What are these? Now we saw it when I showed you the paper model. So this space that is in between the epiglottis. Which part of the epiglottis is this? Suprahyoid or infrahyoid? This is the infrahyoid epiglottis. It is, and superiorly, between the ligament between the epiglottis and the hyoid, hyoepiglottic ligament, and anteriorly we have the hyoid, the thyrohyoid membrane and the thyroid, right? This is what is known as the pre-epiglottic space. Pre-epiglottic space. Is that clear? So will you be able to tell me the boundaries of the pre-epiglottic space? If you just know this, you know it. Yes, you don't have to ratify it. If you know it, if you know the picture, you know it. Yes, so it is the pre-epiglottic space is also known as space of Boyer. Space of Boyer. Where is the pre-epiglottic space here? This is the pre-epiglottic space. Yes, so anteriorly, what do we have anteriorly? Now it is your work to tell me. I already showed you. Yes, it is. We have start from above, we have the hyoid. We have the thyrohyoid membrane. We have the thyroid, right? Yes. Posteriorly, we have the epiglottis. Epiglottis suprahyoid or infrahyoid? It is not suprahyoid, it is infrahyoid. Infrahyoid, yes. Superiorly, what do we have? Yes, it is limited above by the hyoepiglottic ligament. Hyoepiglottic ligament. And what does it contain? Why is it significant? It contains fat. All the spaces around the larynx, they contain fat, and they are the areas through which the vessels and nerves and lymphatics pass. Yes, so what was important here? Vessels, nerves and lymphatic, out of which? Lymphatic. So these are the sites through which the carcinomas of larynx can spread through the outside. The pre-epiglottic space, in fact, is a very important route of spread of tumors of the supraglottis. Why? Because the epiglottis here has multiple openings on it. The epiglottis has multiple foramina. through which the infection can go very easily into the pre-epiglottic space. Here we have the lymphatics, and here it can spread very easily to the outside. That is why the carcinoma of the supraglottis, they spread exuberantly. They very initially present with lymph nodes. They have got very rich lymphatic network. The spread is very fast also. And where is this lymphatics going from? From the pre-epiglottic space. Now we have another space. So what does it contain? It contains fat, it contains vessels, it contains lymphatics. Lymphatics, and the significance is spread of tumor. Spread of tumors. Now this space here, this space, okay, this space, or I can call it this space. This space which is lateral to the larynx. Lateral to the larynx, which means it is in between. We had the thyroid ala here, which we have removed. We have removed one side thyroid ala. This laterally we will have the ala of the thyroid, which we have removed in this picture. And medially we have the quadrangular membrane. We have the ventricle. We have the conus elasticus. That is the cricovocal membrane. The conus elasticus. Yes. So extending lateral to the whole of the length of the larynx in between the thyroid ala and these membranes. This is what is the paraglottic space. And the posterior boundary, can you tell me the posterior boundary of the paraglottic space? Yes, the posterior boundary is the pyriform fossa. Yes, I have shown you in the model also. If you have forgotten, please see the model again, the paper model that I have shown you. Yes, so that is the posterior boundary is the pyriform fossa, and this is a repeated question that is asked in your exam. So the paraglottic space is also known as space of Tucker. It is known as space of Tucker. Space of Tucker, and laterally is the thyroid, medially is the quadrangular membrane, the ventricle, the cricovocal membrane, anteriorly what do we have? Anteriorly we have, it communicates with the pre-epiglottic space, it communicates, and posteriorly we have the pyriform fossa, and again it contains fat and lymphatics and vessels, and the significance is same, spread of tumors. Now we have another space in the larynx, and that is, these were around the larynx, the pre-epiglottic and the paraglottic. Now we have one space that is present in the true vocal cord. Yes, inside the true vocal cord. Where is that space? That is the subepithelial space of the true vocal cord, which means below the epithelial lining. What is the lining epithelium of the true vocal cord? Yes, it is stratified squamous non-keratinized. So just below the epithelium, we have the space which is known as the Rinke's space. Now let us see what the Rinke space is. Let me take a cut section. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this true vocal cord, and what we are going to see now is a cut section of the true vocal cord. So in the cut section, I will first have the lining epithelium, right? So I have cut, I'm drawing this part. Okay, so we have the lining epithelium. Below the lining epithelium, we have the lamina propria. In the deeper layers of lamina propria, we have the collagen fibers and we have the elastin fibers. Now these collagen elastin fibers, they fuse to form a ligament. This is what is known as vocal ligament. And this space that we are seeing, this space that is in between the epithelium of the true vocal cord and the vocal ligament, this space is what is known as Rinke's space. So what is this? This is a submucosal space. This is a subepithelial space of the true vocal cord. And what does it contain? It contains just loose areolar tissue. Why? Because the epithelium of the true vocal cord is not tightly attached to the underlying vocal ligament. Why? Because it needs to move freely during vibration of the vocal cord for proper voice to be produced. So in between the vocal ligament and the epithelium is submucosal space, subepithelial space, which is known as Rinke space. But what can be the side effect of the space is that whenever there is repeated voice abuse or repeated irritation of this space, there can be edema of this space. And edema of this space is what we call as Rinke's edema. So can you see how this has got enlarged, how it has got edematous, this Rinke space? Yes, so this is what is Rinke space. You can see this is the vocal ligament here, the epithelium, the vocal ligament here, the epithelium. So this is got dilated, edematous, this is Rinke's edema. Now Rinke's edema we'll do in detail later on. Yes, but for now I'm just showing it to you so that you can correlate that what the significance of this Rinke space is. So yes, now let us write down the boundaries of the Rinke space. Laterally, now you will tell me all this. I've already told you, you will tell me. Yes, tell me. Laterally, what do we have? Vocal ligament. Vocal ligament. Medially, what do we have? We have the epithelium. Epithelium of the vocal cord. Anteriorly, posteriorly. Yes, it extends throughout the length of the true vocal cord. So anterior is anterior commissure, posterior is posterior commissure. Anterior is anterior commissure. And posterior is posterior commissure. What does it contain? Just loose areolar tissue. Areolar tissue. And significance is it allows movement of the epithelium on the movement or vibration of the vocal cord. Vibration of vocal cord. Movement of the epithelium on the vocal ligament allowing vibration of the vocal cord. Now I told you that the lymphatics pass from the pre-epiglottic and the paraglottic space. So the lymphatics, they go to which lymph nodes? The larynx drains into which lymph nodes? Yes, that is important because I told you that the supraglottis has a very rich lymphatic network. Yes, so which lymph nodes will you look for in supraglottic tumors? And which lymph nodes will you look for in subglottic tumors? And what about glottic tumors? Yes, so this is very important thing about the lymphatic drainage of the larynx that we have to know that the glottis, the true vocal cords literally do not have any lymphatics. And that is why the edema is seen most commonly here in the true vocal cord as Rinke's edema. Why? Because the lymphatic drainage is not there. So that is probably because of impaired lymphatic drainage. But there is one benefit also. That benefit is very immense. What? Because the lymphatics are not there in the glottis, so the spread of glottic carcinomas, metastasis through the lymph nodes will also not be there. And it will be maximum in supraglottic because there we have the maximum lymphatics, followed by next is subglottic. Yes. So what do we know about the lymphatic drainage? Is maximum is in supraglottis. Supraglottis. Glottis is no lymphatics. Glottis is no lymphatics. No lymphatics. We are seeing that glottis, that's at the level of the true vocal cord. It is not only a watershed for lymphatic. Above it, the supraglottis goes to upper lymph nodes. Below it, the subglottis goes to lower lymph nodes. Also, the lining epithelium is also different of the glottis. Yes, so glottis is different in many aspects. So, the supraglottis drains into the upper deep cervical and the middle deep cervical lymph node, that is the 2 and 3 level lymph node, 2 and 3, and the subglottis drains into lower deep cervical, and the lower deep cervical is 4, and also to the anterior group lymph nodes, that is 6. Anterior group, that is 6. What is all this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Yes. What is this? Yes, I know you know all this. Yes, what is this? One is the submental and the submandibular, that we are not concerned with. Larynx does not drain into level 1. What is level 2, 3, 4? That is the internal jugular vein. So it is known as upper deep cervical, middle or the lower deep cervical, or digastric jugulo-omohyoid. So it has been divided, the jugular is divided into 3 parts, upper 1/3, middle 1/3 and lower 2/3. Upper 1/3 is 2, middle 1/3 is 3, lower is 4. So this is at the level of the sternocleidomastoid, you can say this part is 2. This middle part in between the jugulo and this is the omohyoid, right? This is 3. This is 3. And this part all is 4. This is 4, right? So 2, 3, 4 is also known as the lateral group. So the larynx, if I ask you, it drains into which lymph nodes? The larynx drains into lateral group. Lateral group of lymph nodes. Which are the lateral group? Lateral group is 2, 3 and 4, right? Out of which the supraglottis drains into 2 and 3, and the subglottis drains into 4. Is that clear? So true vocal cord is watershed for lymphatic. Above that, the supraglottis drains into the 2 and 3, the subglottis drains into 4, and the glottis literally has got no lymphatics. Yes. Along with that, where is the interior? I told you subglottis also drains into interior. Where is the interior? Yes. So we have done 1, we have done 2, this is 3, this is 4. 5 is what? 5 is the posterior group. 5 is posterior this here. This here is 5, and anterior group Anterior group is the pretracheal, precricoid, pretracheal, precricoid, precricoid. This is the anterior group. Anterior group, also known as level 6. This is known as level 6. Also, this is what is known as Delphian nodes. Delphian. So, the larynx, cut short, to summarize, larynx drains into the lateral group of lymph nodes and Delphian lymph nodes. Is that clear? Which part drains into which? You know. Maximum is supraglottis. Least is glottis. Subglottis drains into lower deep cervical and Delphian. What is Delphian? Delphian is level 6, that is anterior group of lymph nodes. So we have now this complete model of the larynx with the cartilages connected with the membranes, connected with the muscles, and then the epithelium lining it and the spaces around it. Yes, we also know it is draining through which lymphatics. The nerve supply we'll do in great detail when we do the vocal cord palsies. Yes, so we have this complete framework of the larynx in front of us, and this larynx is not the same throughout. In a child, and then at puberty, and then in adult, it changes. And the maximum change is when you compare a larynx of a child and an adult. And yes, these changes are asked. How is an infant larynx different from an adult larynx? Let us see that. So we have two pictures here. Yes, this is of the infant and this is of the adult. This is the adult. The shape of the larynx in infants is funnel shaped. It is funnel. Funnel means it is going down like this. It is funnel. Whereas in adult it is cylindrical. It is cylindrical. It is cylindrical. That is the shape of the larynx. Okay, that is the shape of the larynx. Now, shape of epiglottis. Shape of epiglottis, just see in infants how it is. Yes, can you see it is omega shape? Omega. Is it looking like omega? Yes, so epiglottis shape in infants is omega. Whereas in adult, you tell me, epiglottis shape is leaf shape. Is leaf shape. Yes. And the narrowest part of the larynx in infant, because it is funnel, the lowest part becomes the narrowest. So what is the lowest part? The subglottic. So subglottis becomes the narrowest. Whereas in adults it is cylindrical. At the level of the glottis is the narrowest. So glottis is the narrowest. Now a very, very major difference in the larynx of an infant and a child is the level of the larynx. You tell me the level of larynx of adult. I will tell you of child. Yes, in adult it is C3, 4, 5, 6, whereas in an infant it is C2 and C3. Yes, so in infant it is C2 and C3, whereas adult it is C3, 4, 5, 6, which means that the larynx in children is high placed. What's the significance of this? Okay, just tell me, can you breathe as well as swallow at the same time? Can you breathe and swallow at the same time? Yes or no? See, for breathing, what we need is that this from the nose, the air is going into the larynx. So the inlet should be open. Whereas for swallowing, what happens is swallowing, the epiglottis falls down to close the inlet of the larynx. So at that time, respiration will not be possible. So we can either breathe or we can swallow. Yes. Whereas infants can suckle as well as breathe at the same time. Why? How? Yes, that is because of the highly placed larynx. Why it happens? How it happens? Yes, just see here. Now what happens in infants is, in us what happens is that when we are swallowing, the food is going from the oral cavity, oropharynx, and it is, the epiglottis is going down, it is going from over the epiglottis into the hypopharynx. And at the same time, it is prevented from going into the nasopharynx. Why? Because the palate meets the posterior pharyngeal wall and closes the nasopharyngeal isthmus. Now, in infants, because the larynx is very highly placed, just see here, the larynx is very high, right? So, when the infant swallows, this larynx moves higher up and the epiglottis now, it meets the soft palate and it closes the inlet. It covers the inlet. So, now just see here, what is happening is that when the infant is breathing, the air is going from here, behind the uvula, it is going into the larynx. Okay, now in this cut section, you will be able to see it better. Here we have the oral cavity, we have the oropharynx here. We have the oropharynx. We are seeing the epiglottis, and this is the uvula, right? Now in infants, what happens that this is very high. When the child swallows, it becomes higher up, and this comes lower down, and this, they meet each other, and can you see now? The milk will not be able to go here. If milk is not able to go here, it will not be able to go. This is the inlet. This is the first part of the entry of the larynx. So the entry is blocked now. So now the milk will not be able to enter into the larynx. The milk from here, it will go to the side. It will go into the piriform fossas. At the same time, it will not be entering into the larynx. And at the same time, the air that the child is breathing from the nose, from behind this uvula, it will go through the inlet into the larynx. It will go through the inlet into the larynx. Is that clear? So because of the high placed larynx in infants, they can breathe as well as swallow at the same time. They can breathe and suckle at the same time. And again, this was a question that an infant can breathe as well as suckle at the same time because of large tongue, because of large uvula, because of large soft palate, because of high placed larynx. So what's the answer? Because of high placed larynx at the same time. So we saw how the larynx is different in an infant from an adult. Now at the same time, when the larynx grows in the child, at puberty again occurs changes. Before puberty, the anteroposterior diameter of the larynx is same in males and females. In males, what happens is the anteroposterior diameter enlarges, it increases, and that leads to the change of the male voice. Yes, that becomes a low pitch voice after puberty. So at puberty, there's a drastic difference in the epidiameter of the males and females. And in males, it reaches 36 millimeters, whereas in females, it just remains to 26 millimeters. And also, as the age progresses, after 25 years, anytime, the cartilages of the larynx, they start to ossify, they start to calcify. Calcification starts in the cartilages. What is the significance of that? The significance is that now the cartilages are not very resilient. So they are more prone to fractures. If they calcify, they are more prone to fractures, and also this calcification can be viewed on X-ray. So these cartilages can be viewed very nicely when they get calcified. And which are the ones which will get calcified? Not all get calcified. We know that which cartilages get calcified, only the ones which are hyaline. So which are the hyaline cartilage? In fact, I should ask you which is the elastic cartilage. We know epiglottis is the elastic cartilage. Yes, rest of the important cartilages are all hyaline. So which are the cartilages which are left? The thyroid, the cricoid, arytenoid. The corniculate and cuneiform are of least significance, right? So whenever we talk of the major cartilages, these are the cartilages that we remember along with the epiglottis. Epiglottis we know is the elastic cartilage. Rest here they are hyaline. So they will calcify. You can remember it as ACTH. ACTH, what is ACTH? A is the arytenoid, C is cricoid, and TH is thyroid. Or you can just remember, except for epiglottis, the major cartilages are hyaline. Epiglottis we know is elastic cartilage. E for epiglottis, E for elastic. Now we have seen the complete larynx very beautifully. Yes, quickly you are going to tell me which is the largest cartilage of the larynx. Largest is thyroid. Which is the complete ring cartilage of the larynx? Complete ring cartilages is the cricoid. Which is the leaf-shaped cartilage of the larynx? Epiglottis. Corniculate is also known as Santorini. Cuneiform is also known as Risberg. Which are extrinsic membranes of the larynx? Extrinsic. Quickly tell me the extrinsic membranes. Thyrohyoid, hyoepiglottic, cricothyroid also? Yes or no? No, it is not an extrinsic membrane. Then cricotracheal. Cricothyroid is an intrinsic or extrinsic? Intrinsic. It is a part of which intrinsic membrane? Which membrane? Cricovocal membrane. Tell me the intrinsic membranes of the larynx. Intrinsic membranes are named according to the shape. Which are the two named according to the shaped membranes? Quadrangular and conus elasticus. The lower border of quadrangular membrane forms false vocal cord. The true vocal cord is formed by upper border of conus elasticus. Conus elasticus is also known as cricovocal membrane. Tell me the site of coniotomy. Tell me the site of inferior laryngotomy. Yes? Yes, that is the cricothyroid membrane. That is why it is also known as cricothyrotomy. The internal laryngeal nerve pierces which membrane to enter into the larynx? Yes, the thyrohyoid membrane, the thyrohyoid membrane. Which is the only intrinsic muscle of the larynx lying outside? Cricothyroid. Which is the only unpaired muscle of the larynx? Interarytenoid. Only intrinsic muscle with dual nerve supply? Interarytenoid. Which is the only abductor of the larynx? Abductor of the larynx. Posterior cricoarytenoid. Which are tensors of vocal cord? Tensors. Yes, tell me which one increases the tension? Increases the tension? Cricothyroid. Which one decreases the tension? Vocalis. Vocalis is a part of which muscle? Thyroarytenoid. Inner part of thyroarytenoid or outer part of thyroarytenoid? Inner part of thyroarytenoid. Tell me the function of thyroarytenoid. Thyroarytenoid. Tell me the function of lateral cricoarytenoid. All the muscles of the larynx are adductors. So if I ask you like this, okay, adductors. But if I ask you what is thyroarytenoid, what is lateral cricoarytenoid, all are adductors except for the only one abductor is posterior cricoarytenoid. Safety muscle of the larynx is posterior cricoarytenoid. Oil can of the larynx is oil can. Oil can is the saccule. What is the foramen of Morgagni of the larynx? Sinus of Morgagni of the larynx. Ventricle. Ventricle is in between false and true vocal cord. False vocal cord is the lower border of quadrangular membrane. True vocal cord is the upper border of false vocal cord. Laryngocele of the larynx arises from. Laryngocele arises from the saccule. Yes, that has been a repeated question. Laryngocele arises from saccule. Laryngocele becomes extrinsic by piercing through which membrane? Yes, the thyrohyoid membrane. What sign is seen in laryngocele? It increases on Valsalva. On compression, what sign do you see? Hissing sound. What is that known as? Bryce sign. Bryce sign. What is the subepithelial space of the true vocal cord known as? Subepithelial space of true vocal cord. Rinke's space. Yes, that is Rinke's space. What is the posterior boundary of the paraglottic space? Piriform fossa. Piriform fossa. So we have the complete structure of the larynx in our mind. Tell me the epithelial lining of the larynx. Epithelial lining of the larynx. Ciliated column, except for true vocal cord. True vocal cord. Main is true vocal cord, which is lined by stratified squamous. So we have the epithelial lining. We know the intrinsic membranes, the extrinsic membranes. We know the muscles. Yes, we know the spaces. Yes, we know the cavity inside. So we know everything about the larynx. Now, let us quickly see a 3D model. You must have understood the larynx very, very nicely. We will first see the 3D model and then we will see the actual laryngoscopy, the real life laryngoscopy, how it appears. So first, let us quickly see a 3D model and you will see that you already know everything. Now, we have done the anatomy of the larynx very beautifully. Now, let us quickly have a look at the 3D animation video showing the cartilages of the larynx, how they are articulated and how we have the extrinsic membranes connecting it, and also a quick look at the spaces. So here we have the larynx in front of us. So yes, we are seeing this here is the thyroid cartilage, the two ala meeting in the midline at an angle. Yes, 90 degrees in males, 120 in females. And yes, here we can see the oblique line of thyroid on which are attached the muscles that are attached to the thyroid. Here we have the superior cornu and the inferior cornu. Inferior cornu articulating with the cricoid at the cricothyroid joint. And on the midpoint of the thyroid, yes, just see, medially is attached the epiglottis. Yes, the leaf-shaped cartilage of the larynx. And we can see that the epiglottis is also attached to the hyoid through the hyoepiglottic ligament, dividing the epiglottis into a part above it, suprahyoid, and a part below it, that is the infrahyoid epiglottis. Now coming to the third unpaired cartilage, we have the cricoid here. And cricoid, note that anteriorly it is narrow and it will go on broadening posteriorly. See how broad it is posteriorly. It is the complete ring cartilage of the larynx, the only complete ring cartilage. And on the apex is sitting the arytenoid, the pyramidal cartilage, that is the apex. And here we have the vocal process on which is attached the true vocal cords. And now coming to seeing anteriorly, yes, we have the membrane, the extrinsic membrane in between the thyroid and the hyoid, thyrohyoid, and there we can see the opening for the entry of the internal laryngeal nerve and the superior laryngeal vessels. So this is one of the extrinsic membranes of the larynx. Now we have another extrinsic membrane, and that is in between the epiglottis and the hyoid. Yes, that is the hyoepiglottic ligament. And coming down in between the cricoid and the trachea, we have the cricotracheal membrane. Now we can see in between the cricoid and the thyroid is another membrane. Yes, that is the cricothyroid membrane. That is the site for emergency cricothyrotomy, and that is not an extrinsic membrane. Yes, just see the tracheal rings. They are also C-shaped. They are not complete rings. And just a look at the pre-epiglottic space. Yes, that is below the hyoepiglottic ligament, in between the epiglottis and the thyroid and the thyrohyoid membrane. And on the sides here, this is the paraglottic space on both the sides. The pre-epiglottic space communicates with the paraglottic space. And this paraglottic space extends throughout the length of the larynx. In between, laterally, we have the thyroid ala. And medially, we know we have the quadrangular membrane superiorly and the conus elasticus inferiorly. Now here we are not seeing the intrinsic membrane, but I think you can make out by this picture where we have the paraglottic space. Posteriorly, we have the piriform fossa. So I hope this gave you an exact idea of how the laryngeal cartilages are attached. Now before we see how the larynx appears endoscopically live to us, we need to know what are the various methods by which we can visualize the larynx. So we can do it either with the help of flexible endoscope, or we can do it also with rigid endoscope. Yes, we pass this endoscope through the oral cavity and to the oropharynx, and this is angled. So this will produce light down. We will be able to visualize the larynx. And this angle is usually at 70 or 90 degrees. So the rigid endoscope are of different angles, and another instrument by which we can view the waves of each and every mucosal wave of the true vocal cord. This is what is known as stroboscope. Stroboscope. This is attached to the endoscopes, and this produces lights and in flashes, and that makes the movement of the vocal cord appear very, very slowly. I will show you a stroboscopic video of while the patient is speaking when we do the voice disorders. So here the vocal cords will appear moving very, very slowly, so you can exactly pinpoint where the lesion is in the vocal cord if the lesion is very small. And another method is by indirect laryngoscope. So let us quickly see each of them, how the larynx appears in each of them. Now you will see that sometimes in your questions the picture of the larynx that is given is like this. Sometimes it is given like this, right? So we need to know two things. First, why this difference? And second, whenever this picture is given, we should be able to just have a look and find out which is the anterior part of the larynx, which is the posterior part of the larynx. Why? Because there are certain conditions like vocal nodules, vocal polyps, which we will find always only in the anterior part of the larynx, junction of anterior 1/3 and posterior 2/3. Whereas there are certain other conditions like granulomas, which we find only in the posterior part of the larynx. So if you just can localize that this lesion that you are seeing is in the anterior or the posterior part, you have already narrowed down your choices. Yes. So now this lesion that you are seeing, I have marked this lesion here. Is this in the anterior or the posterior part? How can you make out? For that, what you have to see always is what is the anterior commissure, right? Where the two vocal cords are meeting anteriorly. On the thyroid, this is what's the anterior commissure, and anterior commissure is always anterior, right? So what is this? This is an anterior lesion. This is the anterior lesion. Is that clear? Now just see this. See this. Is this anterior or posterior? This is the same. Yes. Now just see which is anterior, posterior. This is the anterior part, right? So again, this is an anterior lesion. This is at the junction of anterior 1/3 and the posterior 2/3. Is that very clear? Yes. So now why sometimes an image like this is given and why sometimes like that is given? Yes. Why sometimes like this? Why sometimes like that? The most important thing is for you to identify which is the anterior part. But why this difference in the image that is given is, it depends upon how you are viewing the larynx. Now suppose the patient is sitting in front of you and you are passing, how I am doing this rigid endoscopy, or you are passing a flexible endoscope through the mouth. So patient is in front of you. Okay. So now when I have passed the endoscope, how what the structure that I will see? Now see very carefully. Okay. So now here when I pass the endoscope, I will first see the tongue here. Yes, I will see the base of tongue. Then will come the epiglottis, right? Now when I approach the endoscope even further deeper, introduce the endoscope even deeper. So now what will happen is I have gone to the base of tongue here. Yes, I have gone even further posteriorly, and I am seeing now the epiglottis. This will be the epiglottis, the aryepiglottic fold like this. Now when I go even further posteriorly, yes, this this will be the appearance of the complete larynx coming in view. And yes, now this is the appearance. This is the appearance that I will be getting when the patient is sitting in front of me. When the patient is sitting in front of me, his epiglottis will appear anteriorly. His epiglottis is appearing anteriorly. The first thing that I will be seeing is, this is the first thing that I will be seeing. So the first thing that I will be seeing will be the epiglottis, and then I will see the rest of the things posteriorly, right? So if this picture is, it means that the patient is sitting in front of me. Whereas if I am doing a direct laryngoscopy, yes, if I am doing a direct laryngoscopy, now how will the appearance that I will get, or if I am passing a flexible endoscope while the patient is lying down like this, and then I am passing the flexible endoscope. So now how will be the appearance? Yes, so now this patient, the patient is lying down like this, you are standing here at the head end of the patient. So how are the structures that you will see? Yes, you will see the epiglottis first like this. Epiglottis will be in front of you. Like this, in the upper part, you will see the epiglottis. Now this is, you must have seen many number of times. If you have not seen, see it. How can you see it? Don't you do intubation? Have you done? If you have not done, you must be seeing in your wards, in your clinics, intubation being done regularly. So whenever the intubation is being done, just see what are the structures, and this is something that you will see so routinely. So then what you see is, you see the epiglottis anteriorly because the patient is lying like this. So the first thing that you will see above, that will be the epiglottis. And now, yes, the picture will come more clearer. And now this is the picture that you will have. Is that clear? So then whatever you are seeing, you will label it either like this, or you will label it in the other way, depending upon how you have viewed the larynx. So that is why how you are seeing, that only makes a difference. So don't get confused. Don't feel that, oh, upside down image has been given to you. Now, whenever we do direct laryngoscopy, the position of the patient is what is known as a Boyce position. Now, why am I mentioning this here, Boyce position, is because you always confuse it with the Rose's position, okay? So, this is not the Rose's position. What is Rose's position is for when we put the larynx at a higher level. Yes, at a higher level, we want the larynx. So, we put a shoulder bag here so that the larynx gets lifted up. Yes, because we want a larynx at the higher level from this level, so that when we are operating on adenoid, tonsil, trachea, for tracheostomy, the aspiration does not occur. Now, when we want to do a direct laryngoscopy, we want the axis of the oral cavity and the larynx in one line. For that, what we do is we just do extension at the atlanto-occipital joint, and at the cervicothoracic joint, we are just doing flexion. We are not extending here like in Rose's. In Rose's, what we are doing? We are doing extension here also, extension here also. Whereas in Boyce, what we are doing is that we are only doing extension at the atlanto-occipital joint. Occipital joint, and flexion at the cervical joint, or flexion at neck, or cervicothoracic joint. Cervicothoracic joint. And whenever you do direct laryngoscopy, again another thing is asked from you is that which hand do you hold the direct laryngoscope? Yes, so always remember that whenever you are doing any procedure, your dominant hand you will leave free for instrumentation or for suctioning or doing something. The non-dominant hand is the one that you will use to raise the epiglottis, to view the things. So to hold the direct laryngoscope, you will use your non-dominant hand. So usually that is the left hand. And with the right hand, you can pass the endotracheal tube, or you can do suctioning, or you can take the biopsy, whatever you want to do. So now you're quickly going to tell me that this lesion that you are seeing here, is this in the anterior part or the posterior part of the larynx? Anterior or posterior part? Yes, so what you have to notice is this. So this is in the anterior part. Okay, very good. Anterior part. This is this lesion that you are seeing, this here. Anterior part or posterior part? Okay, so this is the anterior, so this is posterior. Okay, in the posterior part. Very good. This is this lesion that you are seeing. This is in the anterior or the posterior part? So yes, this is the anterior part. So again, this is in the anterior part. Okay, this lesion that you are seeing, is in the anterior or the posterior part? So this is the anterior part. So this lesion that we are seeing is in the posterior part. So is that very clear now? So now let us quickly see a video of the endoscopy of the larynx. So here we are going to do a laryngeal endoscopy. The patient is lying down here and you are standing at the head end of the patient exactly how you stand while you are doing a direct laryngoscopy. But here what we are using is not a direct laryngoscope but a flexible endoscope, which we are passing through the oral cavity and then through the oropharynx to view then the larynx. So now let us see why we are seeing it like this. What we are seeing here is this is the soft palate, that is the uvula, and we are seeing the tonsils on both the sides. So we are seeing this view because the patient is lying down and you are viewing this from the head end area. So now we are going down the oropharynx. Yes, we can see the vallicula and we are seeing the suprahyoid epiglottis here. The epiglottis has come into view and yes, the larynx has started coming. We have the epiglottis. We have the aryepiglottic fold, the arytenoid. This here is the false vocal cord and below that we can see the true vocal cord. In between the false and the true vocal cord, we can see the opening. Yes, that is the opening of the ventricle that will lead laterally into the saccule. And below the true vocal cord, we can see the subglottis and we are also able to see the tracheal rings. Please see carefully through the glottic opening, the rima glottidis, you are able to see the subglottis and below that you also able to see the tracheal rings. And yes, behind the larynx is the hypopharynx. So this here is the posterior pharyngeal wall and we have there the piriform fossa and that is the postcricoid. So postcricoid, the piriform fossa and the posterior pharyngeal wall. So that is what is the hypopharynx and in front of that we have this larynx. So this is exactly how we saw in the endoscopic pictures also when we did the anatomy. So yes, we can see now we are going to take the endoscope out. Yes, so now here what we are seeing is some ligament. Can you make out which ligament this is? In between the epiglottis and the hyoid. So that is the hyoepiglottic ligament. Yes, and this is the suprahyoid part of the epiglottis. So now we will take the endoscope out and that is how the laryngeal endoscopy appears. And if any of these is given, any of these areas are marked in your exam, I am sure you will be able to answer it correctly. So we saw how we see the larynx when we are doing endoscopy examination. Now, what is indirect laryngoscopy? The indirect laryngoscopy, the name itself tells you that you are doing laryngoscopy, you are visualizing the larynx but indirectly. Why indirectly? Because when you're doing endoscopy, you're having a direct image of the larynx, whereas in indirect laryngoscopy, you are seeing the image of the larynx in the mirror. Is that clear? So it is like viewing the larynx in the mirror. So it is known as indirect laryngoscopy. So this is the mirror that we use. This is what is known as indirect laryngoscope mirror or indirect laryngoscopy mirror. And this is different from posterior rhinoscopy mirror. This is straight. This is straight. This has a straight handle. The handle is straight. And how do we do it? Yes, we have to go behind the base of tongue in the oropharynx to view the structures below in the larynx or the hypopharynx. So for that, we need the base of tongue to be away. Behind the base of tongue, the area needs to be clear. It needs to be open. So for that, what we do is we pull the tongue. We pull the tongue and we hold the tongue with the thumb and the middle finger like this, and with the index finger we open the mouth, we raise the lip as you are seeing here, right? With the index finger the lip is raised, and now again all this is being done with the non-dominant hand. With the dominant hand, that is with the right hand, here the indirect laryngoscope is passed against the uvula. It is placed against the uvula, pressed against the uvula, and you will see a picture of the larynx, right? Now when you are seeing like this is how will appear. Yes, so now when you're putting the indirect laryngoscopic mirror like this, what we should be able to see is a picture like this. The patient is standing in front of you, but we do not see a picture like this. Why? Because we are seeing a mirror image of this. We are seeing this image in the mirror. So we will see a mirror image, right? Is that clear? We are going to see a mirror image. We know how to draw the mirror image, right? This is the mirror. This is the mirror that we have placed above. So what we will see is the image in the mirror, and this will appear like this, and then we draw this thing, and that is what you always draw whenever you draw the larynx. How do you draw? You draw the epiglottis. We have the epiglottis. We have the aryepiglottic folds, the arytenoid. aryepiglottic folds and arytenoid. Is that clear? And then we have the true vocal cords. True vocal cords, and sometimes we also draw lateral to the true vocal cords the false vocal cords. Is that clear? Is that clear? And above that sometimes this is drawn. What is this? This is the area of the vallicula. This is the area of the vallicula. So this is how you draw. This is the picture that you see in the mirror of indirect laryngoscopic mirror. So this is also whatever you draw, this is the epiglottis. This is the aryepiglottic fold, the arytenoid here. This is the true vocal cord, and here we have the false vocal cord. So what you need to know when you see the picture of the larynx is, first you should be able to identify which part of the larynx that you are viewing, whether it is supraglottis, whether it is glottis, whether it is subglottis, and exactly what are the part that you are viewing, whether it is epiglottis, aryepiglottic fold, false vocal cord, whether it is true vocal cord, whether it is subglottis, and then you should be able to identify the lesion that you are seeing, and the lesion for localizing it in the vocal cord. I told you how you can localize it. Just see where the anterior commissure is, and why these pictures look different now. Also, you know that whichever procedure you will be doing, what are you expecting to find when you go for that procedure. So that is what completes the anatomy of the larynx, and I'm sure that you'll be able to answer each and every question of the anatomy of the larynx.